With the growing fatigue of isekai and the monstrous arrival of Mushoku Tensei, unfortunately a lot was riding against the Faraway Paladin as it aired in the fall 2021 anime season. So the big question will come out, is it worth checking out the Faraway Paladin? What exactly is its worth in the slew of isekais that are out? Well, that's what we're going to get into with my review of the Faraway Paladin, or Saihate no Paladin, a 12-episode series that was done by Child's Playground Entertainment. So with that said, let's jump into it. The Faraway Paladin opens up like most isekais. A guy is transferred from another world into this world of fantasy. In this particular one, he's put into the body of an infant, but interestingly enough, he's being taken care of by 3 undead beings. And they're in this secluded tomb out in the middle of nowhere. And these 3 undead beings is Blood, who is this gigantic skeleton warrior, Mary, who is a mummy priest, and Gus, who is a ghost wizard. And for a majority of this season, a lot of focus is on raising Will. Will is being raised up by these 3. They're teaching him things of this world, the lore, its history, its deities that everybody ends up serving one of them, and also how to fight. And all the while, you got this sense of mystery about it. Because on one hand, Will is not revealing his secret to the rest of them that he is an isekai. He doesn't actually really remember much of his past life. And at the same time, it seems like these 3 undead are keeping a secret from Will. That there's some purpose for them raising him the way that they're raising him. And it's not until eventually he gets to a certain age they decide to give him one final trial before revealing pretty much everything about their past. Essentially, this mad king who went on this big rampage across the land, summoning up demons who were all sacrificing people for more demons, all to create this big chaos that eventually involved the gods. And also seemingly this pact that the 3 of them had made to this undead god Stagnant, and how after kind of fulfilling their task, they're supposed to give themselves up to the Stagnant. And it's through this conflict that eventually we have Will coming to find himself blessed by a very kind of unknown god, which is Gracefield, this goddess of light. And now serving Gracefield, he goes on an adventure across the land in order to bring light into the farthest depths of the world. And this becomes a huge turning point for the series as you watch Will as he travels across the world, meets different people such as an elf, a traveling bard, and even a merchant. And all the while helping people that he comes across. Again, he feels that it's his duty in order to bring light into darkness. And so there's a lot of people that are in danger that he helps. He fights off demons. He gives rest to the restless, the dead, and brings healing to those that are injured. Which gets me to my thoughts on the Faraway Paladin. This is a big question mark, obviously, for a lot of people. Is it worth checking out the series? Again, so many isekais out there, what is this one doing? And while I don't put this on the levels of something like Mushoku Tensei, obviously not, it's very hard to reach that level, but I feel it's doing a lot similar to Mushoku Tensei, where a lot of the focus is on the character themselves growing and the world they're in. Taking a step back from really most all the other isekais that are more focused on harem and comedy and stuff like that, and more focused on grounding it in an actual fantasy setting. This show feels very grounded. It feels very focused on the mechanics of the world, the gods of the world, and the people within that world, all circumstances of this big, great, catastrophic event that happened several years before. But interestingly enough, the thing that really did connect with me, the thing that made me kind of grab onto the show and really stick with it was, yes, because of how much emphasis was put on the world itself, but more so on Will, and how unique he is to really any isekai I've ever watched. I made a whole video on this concept of the Warrior of Light, and how so many stories, especially in Japanese stories, don't really paint the Warrior of Light as being a positive person. Religious groups, the church, all these kind of things are all kind of seen in a negative light. If you watch a show and you run into a pope or something, they're gonna be evil. They are probably gonna be the bad guy. They're gonna be the big evil organization in the background that wants to tarnish the person that is the main character. But the Faraway Paladin isn't so much. And it's because they establish really quickly that the gods of this world exist, and the people serve those gods. And with Will's god being Gracefield, this goddess of light, he does want to serve her. And so much of his focus ends up being on serving her. And so thus he is trying to help the people. He is bringing healing to groups. He's kind of trying to be, in a lot of cases, helping disputes that are happening. And again, ultimately, in the end, bringing light into the darkness, giving rest to the undead, those kind of things ends up being his focus. He ends up becoming a very cool guy, a very good-natured person. And yes, a person with power, and a power that he eventually will have to struggle with, and how that alienates him. But in the end, it turns into a character that you want to root for. He is the good person. He is this person that is ultimately bringing light into some very dark situations. And I really do find it fascinating and unique compared to so many other shows that are just about, well, I've been isekai, I'd better get my harem and get overpowered. It's so much more focused on his duty and his purpose. But I will admit that early on, I was really struggling with even introducing anybody to this series, because what was really quickly established early on was that it felt like a majority of this season was so focused on opening up the world and describing the world. So much detail put into the history and not so much the now. And with only 12 episodes to work with, the big struggle was, well, is this going to be just a big, prologue to the rest of the story? But thankfully, we got a second season announced. And so it kind of helps in that I can now recommend a series that was so devoted on setup. Because I know that based now on the fact that they put so much focus on that eventually we can get into more stuff. That we can get into his actual journey, which again didn't take until about halfway through the season before we even started. But thankfully, because of what they started kind of introducing, the formula of what they started introducing of what he was going to be doing, let me know that as it goes on, as the story gets beyond that world building, we're going to have something special here. Because so much groundwork was laid that they can do so much with. With one caveat, with one big, huge but. And that was the final moments of this season. I don't know exactly what they're going to do with it. It could do something completely different, but they've essentially hinted at the idea of this being a nation-building story, which for some people might be a big groan. Because really I was set on the idea that now that we've established this world, let's adventure into it. There's this unknown that he doesn't know anything about. What's beyond this hill? What's beyond this forest? And keep traveling again to bring light into the darkness. But what that last moments of this season kind of introduced was, no, instead, let's stay here and grow. And I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or not, because I haven't yet got an idea if this writer is good at nation building stories. We've gotten those with things like Slime, Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy, a lot of shows like this idea of building a nation. And some of them do it good, and some of them don't do it so good. So I don't know if this writer really has that in them. They do world building really well, so maybe nation building's right there with it. We don't know yet, but I hope it doesn't hamper this feeling of Will going out into the world. Instead, I feel like it could possibly turn it into Will being stuck in one place, and I really hope that's not the case, because it's at its best when it has him go into the unknown and help people, not so much stay in one place and just build things. But we'll have to wait and see. That's not really for here to say. We'll have to wait for the second season, which, again, thankfully has been announced. Some other things to get into is additional characters. Early on, really did enjoy Blood, Gus, and Mary. I thought they were fantastic kind of parental figures that really did kind of humanize Will and his personality. But additionally, outside of that, again, we introduce other characters such as Meneldor, who is this elf, really does have a tsundere kind of mentality, but for a reason. And I really did like seeing the growth in Menel. Unfortunately, for other characters like Bee and Tonio, we don't really get too much development in. I unfortunately kind of felt most of the interaction between those two to be more about trying to ground Will, and now that I think about it, prepare for what's to come, which is the world building and the nation building aspect, so maybe their introduction wasn't so good for me. But Will himself, I'm struggling with, honestly. Like I said, I like him as the Warrior of Light. I think he's really good. Pure nature is really something you can attach to and really root for. But at the same time, the struggle does come of why isekai? I love that question. Why isekai? Honestly, unlike things like Mushoku Tensei, unlike things like Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy, I really don't, at this point, understand why this was made an isekai. It has not played on it at all, except for to introduce him saying Haxor, which I think, again, indicates that he was probably isekai from the year 2000, because I don't know anybody that said that word since then. But again, without them playing off it really at all, besides having one brief moment where he says, I've let people down in the past and I won't do it again, it hasn't really done anything with it. Maybe it's something that will come up later, but for now, it just feels like, why bother? Because this would have been a really solid, just pure fantasy, just having him being born in this world and introduced to it. When it comes to animation, here's where a little bit of a struggle comes up. I really like the style of this show. It has a very soft, almost color pencil sort of shading to it. It looks very soft, and I really do like it for that. It gives me a lot of the similar feelings of something like Mushoku Tensei, a very soft color to it, almost like it has a filter on it. It has some great animation points in the show, but there is a lot of parts where children's playground entertainment seem to have struggled a little bit. There was a few very wonky character design moments, a few points where it felt like the animation was very lacking, and especially the later battles, real rough. We kind of, out of nowhere, introduced a whole bunch of demons that were CGI, and it didn't look good. A lot of the fights feel very slow. So I'm hoping that with the second season, they will get more budget. It wasn't like I got angry at the animation. It just started looking really rough, especially later on. A lot of the character scenes where they're in a bar and stuff is like, oh, this does not look good. This look very rough. But the battle themselves, I think what comes of those is where I think early on was a lot of my intrigue. I loved how they did fights in this show, or at least in the story itself. Because it's not just about slash, 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 or pew, pew, pew with magic. There was a lot of tactic in the fights themselves. Will thinks things through thoroughly. There's a lot of counter magic. There's a lot of magic to offset things. There's a lot of things to it. And I like the fact that he's not just a fighter. He's not just a caster, he's a mixture of both. He's a paladin. And so when you have fights, a lot of the times he's meticulously thinking out how he's going to fight. So he sees a demon, he knows that demon's going to cast magic, he'll use a silencing spell and then go in for the attack with some acceleration. So there's multiple facets to the fight that it's building into. And I really like that about this show. Again, it's more than just one single mechanic. There's a tactic to how he fights. And I really like that. It does play into everything that was instilled upon him by his parents. But overall, that's my thoughts on the series. I really am looking forward to a second season. Like I said, there was a lot of build up in the season and a lot of world building that I really did like. I just, again, struggled halfway through the show, really wondering, are they going to do anything with all this? And I think they're starting to. And that really has me hoping that second season is going to be a solid season. And again, I do have fears of it becoming a nation-building show, which would be completely counter to everything it's built up so far and the sense of adventure and Will learning things. But at the same time, I kind of have trust in this writer to do something really cool. I mean, the whole concept is the Faraway Paladin, the concept of taking light into darkness, and you can't really do that in one place unless it's just to make one area glow a lot. But we'll see. But that's my thoughts on the Faraway Paladin. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, leave a like down below, comment. Let me know what you thought of this series if you're going to check it out. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon if you can, or our tips link in the description below. Definitely appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.